Hello, everybody. David Smith from Emmanuel Baptist Church, and once again, coming to you live from my very own living room. And I have to apologize for last night. I was coughing, letting my brains out, and it was all from having allergies and stuff like that. But nonetheless, it's action-packed. You can hear the phone ringing in the background. I was a little late getting started tonight because my grandkids were outside and wanted to see their papa. So a man's got to have their priorities, and so we were out there and talking to the baby. So if I'm just a few minutes late, sorry about that. Real quick, got to make a quick announcement to my wife. Somebody just called your phone, darling. Okay. But anyway, thought I'd start off with a joke. I haven't told a joke in a while. This guy's driving down the road one day and minding his own business, doing about 55, 65 miles an hour, and he looks out the window, and out to the left of him was a chicken, and it was running right beside his car. So this chicken is running about 65 miles an hour, and it was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. So he looks at the chicken a little closer, and the chicken had 3 legs, and pretty soon the chicken goes in front of him and cuts in front of his car and runs down the alley. That man's like, what was that? So he turns over and he goes over to that alley and he pulls up and gets out, and there's a farmer standing in the middle of the alley. There's a farmer in this story. But anyway, he walks up to the farmer and he says, "Did you see a 3-legged chicken run through this alley just a minute ago?" And the farmer says, "You see a 3-legged chicken?" He said, "I did." He goes, that's my chicken." He says, "My wife and I raised 3-legged chickens." He goes, "Why would you raise 3-legged chickens?" He goes, "Okay, you like a good chicken leg?" He goes, "Yep." He goes, "Your wife like a good chicken leg?" "Yep." "What if somebody comes over to your house and they like chicken legs? Now you have 3 chicken legs." He goes, "Oh, never thought about that. That's great. Do they taste good?" And he goes, "I don't know. We've never caught one." Sorry, that was stupid. I'm so sorry. I apologize for. Okay, I'm not going to quit my day job. Okay, so it's no big deal. All right, so tonight I want you to think about something. And if someone came up to you and they were talking to you, and you said, "Hey, listen," they said to you, I know everything about you. And then they start telling you things, they start telling you things that about you, that and it starts getting a little uncomfortable, like they know where you were born, when you were, what time you were born, who your neighbors were, who your best friend was, everything. And then they say, "I even know some of the things you've done." And so they start laying out some of the things. Don't you think the hair on your neck would stick out and you get all goosebumpy because this person knows so much about you? Well, listen, in the midst of your life, and whether it's in good times or trouble, it is a comfort to know that God knows the complete condition of man. God has perfect knowledge of mankind. And in Psalm 139, he talks about that perfect knowledge. And as he writes this, it's a Psalm of David. It's interesting finding a Psalm of David this late, but in the books, because the Psalms, they're not all by David. I said that to someone here a while back, and they were quite shocked. There's songs of Moses and the sons of Korah and Asaph, but anyway, Psalm 139 is a well-known psalm. It's by King David, and he is talking about the intimacy. Now, last night, if you joined us, we talked about Paul wanting to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and to be found in him. And the interesting thing is, in order for you to achieve that, the ball is in our court to start developing that intimacy with God that allows us to be found in him, that allows us to be drawn in and close to him and to have intimacy with God. Now, see, that word intimacy is misused a lot in today's society, and it's kind of given a twist that it's what it's not. Intimacy means a close and intensely personal knowledge of one another. And in this particular case, David is talking about that. And he says, "Oh Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off." That's a comfort, because half the time I don't understand the thoughts that are coming out of my mind, but God knows them. And then he says, "You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. There is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it." Now listen, one of the things that we've talked about is how God's ways are above ours. His thoughts are not ours. And how big and powerful and mighty and amazing and transcendent and omnipresent and omnipotent God is. And yet David is speaking about God knowing everything about him. And there's a great comfort in someone who loves you, even though they know your deepest, darkest secrets. They know the worst thing about you, and yet they love you. And that's the kind of God that we serve. And so after he talks about this intimacy of God's knowledge, that even before we speak, God knows the word that is going to come from our mouth. And then in verse 7, it changes, and he starts talking about the omniscience of God, the ever-presence of God. And so those of you that suffer from loneliness, those of you that suffer from depression and anxiety, one of the things that you can take a great deal of comfort in is knowing that God's presence is there with you. You are never alone, ever. God is right there with you, and he is listening to your prayers. And you can have a conversation with him as easily as I'm having a conversation with a web camera right now. And it makes more sense to talk to God than it does for me to talk to a web camera. And so he says in verse 7, "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there." The word hell there is the word Sheol, or the grave. If I make my bed in the grave, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me to you. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide me from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. We can't hide from God. We can't hide ourselves from God. We can't hide our thoughts, our words, our actions, which makes the betrayal when we fail God so much more, because he sees it coming before we even see it coming. But yet that's why Jesus, the great Lamb and the one who makes provision for us in his mercy, has been willing and was willing to go to the cross and to suffer and die so that we can have an intimacy with Almighty God, with the omnipotent God. Then he talks about how far this intimacy goes in verse 13. For he's talking to God, "For you formed me, my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." Listen, if I can get you to say one thing when you wake up in the morning, I want you to say that. I praise you, God, because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. It doesn't matter the condition of your body. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And God's desire is health. And I'm on this health kick. I'm trying to shed some weight and trying to get my body to be more able to do things that I haven't been able to do in the past. But God has fearfully and wonderfully made my body. And he knows how it is to function. And we can trust in him to help us in that. And then it says, "Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest part of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed." See, right there, that destroys the argument of abortion. God sees us before we were even formed. His eyes are so advanced. His knowledge is so amazing that even before we were formed, God knew us. And that's a great comfort to me. That's a great comfort that God knew my days before they even started. He says, your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all my days were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. Before you and I were even here, God had ordered the days before us. And in that order, he knows exactly what we need to temper us and to build us into the solid believer that he needs to share the gospel. When I say needs, I really say wants. God needs nothing, but his desire is that we be tempered and bold and strong to show forth the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ in our life. And then he starts talking about the thoughts of God in verse 17. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. You can't even begin to think about the sum of God's thoughts. If I were to count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. See, God never leaves us. He never forsakes us. When you're at your loneliness, he's right there, ready to hear from you. He can be a source of comfort to you. And I can tell you, personal experience, there's been days where I've been down in the dumps, and when I go to God, my spirit is lifted. Every single time it's happened. Every single time I've allowed the circumstances surrounding us to push me down, I've been able to go to God, and he has been able to lift me up. And so we can trust in God, and we can see that God is moving mightily in our lives if we just look. And he says, oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men, for they speak wickedly against you. Your enemies take your name in vain. And do I not hate, O Lord, those who hate you? And do not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them as my enemies. People say, well, you're not supposed to hate. Christians aren't supposed to hate. What David is talking about here is having zero tolerance for life in sin, even in our own life, folks. Before we cast a stone, we have to deal with the sin in our own life. Sin is sin. There are no categories. Sin is sin. It separates us from God. And so not only are we to hate the sin in the lives of others, but we're to despise the sin in our own life. And how do I know that? How do I know that David was saying that? It happens in verse 23 and 24. Listen to this. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. When David said, I hate those that hate you, when you sin, it's the same thing as projecting hatred toward God. It is criticizing and bringing reproach upon the body and death and resurrection of Christ. And do you not hate that about yourself? I listen to so many people, and they have this beautiful way of praying, and I hear your prayers of faith, and then invariably I hear this same phrase repeated, forgive me, Lord, when I fail you. And I love that phrase. But you know what? I think in our own private time, in our quiet time, let's get specific with God. And let's talk to God about those things that we despise in ourselves, that we wish that he would take out. Now, he may say, I'm going to leave that there because my grace is sufficient for you, just like Paul. But at the same time, let's hate the unrighteousness that dwells in us and express the love of God, because he knows everything about you. He knows all of your secrets. There's nothing you can hide from him. You cannot escape him. His gaze is always on you. But the beautiful thing about that is that at the same time his gaze is upon you and he's always present, he's saying, come on, take my hand. Reach out and take my hand. And when he says that, he says that to all of us, to the believers who just need to get right with God, and to those that don't believe, that finally a light shines in the darkness, a switch is flipped, and you suddenly understand, oh, God God loves me and he wants a relationship with me. And then the ball is in your court and you admit to God you are a sinner. You just tell him in prayer, God, I've sinned against you and I want to turn from that sin. And then you tell him, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that Christ rose from the dead. And then thirdly, you say, you acknowledge him and you commit your life to following him. You do those three things, the Bible tells us that the Holy Spirit enters into our life and takes up residence, and he teaches us God's way. So when we say, search us, O God, and try me, and see if there is any way in me that is wicked, and lead me in the path everlasting, we're asking God to constantly help us watch for ways we're being disobedient. And if you pray to receive Christ or any other decision you make, we want to know about it. We want to hear about it. So send us a private message here on Facebook, or you can go to our website and send an email. We would love to hear from you. And if you did pray a prayer to receive Christ, we have some material that we want to send to you that talks about the next step. Lastly, I want to give you some great news. Okay? I talked to our Director of Missions, Norm Howell, today. And he says it looks like that we may be able to start doing a degree of corporate worship again within the next few weeks. Now, of course, this is all model based. The authorities will be looking at the trends. If the virus infection is going up, obviously we'll have to wait a little bit longer. But knowing that there's going to be a time very soon where we're all going to be together again, that gives me such great joy, knowing that very soon we're going to be together again. Now, we may not be hugging and snuggling up to each other and shaking a hand, but we're going to be together and we're going to corporately worship the King of Kings. Listen, call somebody. Invite them to watch the live stream tomorrow. Listen, I know it's awkward. It's clunky. We have a stereo that's our accompanist. We have the backdrop of a little hutch in the back behind me, and that random, there it is, that random curl up there that appears in my head once in a while. And yes, there's noises, but you know what? We worship the King of Kings, and we can worship him right now. Our hearts can join together. I encourage you, find a way, go online, look up some worship music tonight, and sing together as a family. And then pray that God sings over you. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine brightly upon you. And may he bring you peace. God bless you.